For 3 years he said nothing, until the Duke of Harrowvale named her before them all. Engine F, the secret narrator, the Duke's brother heroine, a debtor's orphan whose name society has ruined by rumored Duke of Harrowvale setting. Ballroom plus private library mood. Brooding then tender tilde 550 words. My brother never spoke of her. That was the first thing I noticed, and I noticed it because my brother spoke of everything: the state of the northern roads, the grain yield at Harrowvale, the insult embedded in a particular man's handshake. Edmund, the fourth Duke of Harrowvale, had opinions about curtain fabric and treaty clauses with equal ferocity, and he aired them without apology. He was not a man who withheld. He was not a man who kept his counsel. He was not, in any sense anyone in London society had ever witnessed, a man given to silence. And yet, for 3 years, from the winter of the Ashmore ball to the evening I am about to describe, he never once spoke her name. I knew something had happened. The shape of the silence told me. It had edges. It pressed on him in certain rooms, at certain hours, whenever a particular kind of woman, plain-dressed, dark-eyed, composed past what her station seemed to warrant, moved through his peripheral vision, and his jaw tightened by a fraction. I knew my brother. I had watched him navigate war rooms and marriage markets and his mother's scheming with the same iron ease. I had never seen him flinch. He flinched sometimes when he thought no one was watching. I was always watching. Her name was Miss Cecily Voss. She was the daughter of a merchant who had died in debt, not the fashionable kind of debt that men of rank carried like a badge, but the ruinous, contemptible kind that left a daughter with nothing but a borrowed coat and the charity of a distant cousin in Belgrave Square. She had come to London 3 seasons ago as a dependent relation, which was to say she had come as a useful ghost, present at the table, invisible at the party, expected to be grateful for the crumbs. I had met her twice. Once at the Caldenmere musicale, where she had sat in the corner chairs with the other companions and governess-adjacent figures, and had said almost nothing until Lady Caldenmere's eldest son made a remark about Italian ornamentation that was spectacularly wrong, at which point Miss Voss had quietly, without turning her head, said 4 precise words that corrected him entirely, and then returned to saying nothing. I had liked her immediately. The second time was at the Harrowvale town house, which should perhaps have told me something. She had come with a letter of introduction from Mrs. Eldred Farrow, a solicitor's wife who handled charitable cases with more efficiency than most men handled their estates. Edmund had been hiring a new keeper for the household records, a position that required, in his words, someone with a head for figures, a constitution for tedium, and the discretion not to discuss what they read. Miss Voss had arrived, answered his questions without ornament, demonstrated she could hold 3 numerical threads simultaneously without losing any of them, and left. He had not hired her. I thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. What I learned, all of it, not just the pieces I had assembled from a 3-year distance. I learned in a library on a Tuesday evening in February, while a ball proceeded 1 floor above us, and the sound of the string quartet filtered down through the ceiling like something from another country. It began with a name spoken in the wrong voice. I had come downstairs for a book, which is the kind of excuse that sounds invented and was, in this case, entirely true. The Whitmore Library was the finest in Belgravia, and Lord Whitmore permitted his guests the use of it during his entertainments because he was the sort of man who understood that some guests required an intermission from joy. I was among them. The ball was lovely. I had danced 3 times. I needed the quiet. Edmund was already there. He was standing at the window, not reading, not drinking, simply standing with his coat still perfectly in order and his hands clasped at his back, watching the frost collect on the glass in the way that suggested the glass was not what he was seeing. He did not turn when I entered. He knew it was me by the sound of my step, which is the peculiar knowledge of brothers who have spent too much time in houses together. "You should be upstairs," I said. "You should be upstairs," he said. "I needed a book." "You need an intermission." "As do you, apparently." He said nothing. I found my book. I sat. I was there for perhaps 4 minutes before the door opened a second time, and Miss Cecily Voss walked in looking precisely as she had looked 3 years ago, plain-dressed, dark-eyed, composed, except that her composure, I could see now, was being held together by considerable effort. Her eyes were bright, not with happiness. She stopped when she saw Edmund. Edmund turned from the window. The silence between them was not the silence of strangers. "Miss Voss," he said, Your Grace, she said. Neither of them looked at me. I believe neither of them remembered for a moment that I was there. I remained very still, in the manner of a man who has suddenly understood that he is witnessing something that was not meant for witnesses. They are saying it again, she said. Her voice was steady. Upstairs, Lady Fenthorpe and Mrs. Aldrich, they are saying She stopped. Her chin lifted a fraction the way a person's chin lifts when they are refusing to let something surface. I heard it as I came down the corridor, that I was that Mr. Aldrich and I. I know what they are saying, Edmund said. They have been saying it for 3 years. I know. And you, she paused again, not from weakness, from precision. She was choosing the word with the care of someone who has been wronged very specifically and will not let the wrong be softened. You have said nothing. The room was very quiet. Above us, the quartet had moved into something slow. Cecily, he said, and I heard it, the thing he had kept out of his voice for 3 years, the thing the silence had been made to contain. One word, her name, like a door coming open that had been held shut a very long time. He told me the rest of it afterward, not that evening, but a week later, sitting in his study at Harrowvale with the accounts between us and his hands flat on the desk, which was how Edmund always held himself when he was going to say something true. She had come to his house 3 years ago, and he had not hired her. That much was true, but she had come to his house 3 years ago for a second reason, one she had not told Mrs. Farrow, one she had not told anyone because she had nowhere else to bring it. She had come because she had discovered something about the death of her father. The merchant Voss had not died in debt through incompetence. He had been cheated systematically over 4 years by a man named Aldrich, the same man whose wife was now spreading the rumor about Miss Voss and her missing virtue. The same family. The same cruelty, shaped differently. Aldrich had manipulated Voss's accounts through a series of proxy agents and falsified instruments. And when Voss died and the creditors arrived, Aldrich had stood at the front of the line with a face of profound sympathy and walked away with the largest portion of what remained. Miss Voss had spent 2 years assembling the proof. She had come to Edmund because Edmund sat on 2 financial oversight committees and had, she had heard, refused a bribe from Aldrich the previous year in a manner that was still being discussed in the right circles. She had come because she had no one else to bring it to. She had brought him every document. He had told her to go home. He had told her he would handle it. She had gone home and waited. And then the rumors had started. And she had understood, not immediately, but within a month, with the precision of a woman who thinks clearly even when she is frightened, that Aldrich had seen her at Harrowvale and drawn the worst conclusion a man with a guilty conscience draws when he sees his victim seeking an ally. He had struck first. He had built the story around her. A single woman, no family, no money, no standing, seen entering the town house of a powerful duke. The story told itself, didn't it? The story always told itself, in a certain kind of society, when the woman had nothing to protect her. She had waited 3 years for Edmund to speak. Edmund had spent 3 years dismantling Aldrich from the inside. He had not told her because he had not trusted the process to hold, had not wanted to give her hope and then watch it collapse, had not wanted to expose her to the additional danger of Aldrich knowing she was being protected. He had done it quietly, methodically, the way he did everything, without announcement, without asking for credit, without letting anyone see the machinery. He had also, and this was the piece of it that undid me if I am honest, been quietly ensuring that certain households continued to receive her, that certain invitations arrived, that she was not simply erased from the world while he worked, small acts, anonymous ones. He knew which hostesses could be maneuvered and which could be trusted, and he had moved them like pieces on a board, not to make her visible, but to make sure she was not invisible, to make sure she was still standing when the moment came. The moment had come, apparently, on a February Tuesday in the Whitmore Library. You should have told me, she said that evening. Not angry. Exhausted the way you are exhausted when you have been carrying something a very long time and it has finally been put down, and the relief of it is almost indistinguishable from grief. I know, Edmund said. I thought you had, she stopped. What did you think? She looked at him. She had remarkable eyes. I have said they were dark, but that is imprecise. They were dark and still, the kind of still that comes from deciding at some point that you will not show people more than you choose to show them. I thought you had decided the trouble wasn't worth it, she said. I thought you had looked at the cost of the thing and found it inconvenient. I thought about you every day for 3 years, Edmund said. The room held that. She said nothing. I have the papers, he said. It is done. Aldrich's primary partner turned this morning. The committee will have the full account by Friday. It will not be private. It will not be quiet. He will not be able to undo it. He paused. And I am going back upstairs, and you are coming with me. She looked at him. Your Grace. Edmund, he said. My name is Edmund. I believe you know that. Edmund, she said it carefully, the way you say a word you have thought privately for a long time and are saying aloud for the first time. You have been patient, he said. Longer than anyone had the right to ask of you. You have been patient and you have been quiet and you have been here. I would like to stop asking you to wait. I followed them upstairs. I was not proud of myself for this. I am not in general a man who trails after private moments. But I had spent 3 years watching my brother carry something he wouldn't name, and I found I could not go back to the library and simply read while the conclusion of the thing unfolded 1 floor above me. I am human. I followed them. The ball was in full bloom. The chandeliers had the particular golden intensity that comes at the midpoint of an evening, when the candles have had time to warm and the wine has had time to soften everyone at the edges. Lady Fenthorpe was holding court near the east wall in the way she always held court, which was to say she was standing with 3 other women and saying something that required them all to look in the same direction and then look back at each other with shared comprehension. Mrs. Aldrich was among them. I know what they were looking at. I know because I followed Edmund's eye line and saw Miss Voss had not come upstairs with us. She had held back at the door, perhaps intending to slip to the side rooms, perhaps not quite ready, perhaps unsure what she was meant to do with the fact that her life had just been rearranged in a library while a string quartet played overhead. Edmund stopped. He turned back to the door. He held out his hand. She looked at it. She looked at him. She was still in the plain dress, still dark-eyed and still-faced, still wearing the particular composure she had assembled over 3 years of being looked at incorrectly. She was not, I want to be clear about this, trembling. She was not a woman who trembled. But she was looking at his hand with the expression of someone who has been offered something they had stopped believing would come, and is now calculating very quickly whether it is real. She took his hand. He walked her into the room. He did not do it quietly. Edmund did very few things quietly when he had decided they should be done. He walked her in at the pace of a man who has somewhere to be and intends to arrive, and the room, because rooms always feel a duke walk into them, and rooms always feel it when a duke is doing something unexpected, shifted. Conversations lagged. Eyes moved. He brought her to the center of the floor, not the edge where companions and dependents stood. The center where the acknowledged guests stood, where the people who mattered stood. He stood beside her and he said, at a volume calibrated precisely to the radius of the watching faces, Miss Voss has been a guest at Harrowvale for the past 3 years, and I have been remiss in not saying so publicly before now. It was not a speech. Edmund did not make speeches. It was a statement of record, delivered in the voice he used for financial committee proceedings, and it was devastating in its plainness. There was no flourish. There was no theatrical devotion. There was simply a duke of one of the oldest estates in England, standing in the center of a Belgravia ballroom, naming a woman that society had been quietly erasing, as though the erasure had simply been a clerical error he was now correcting. Lady Fenthorpe's mouth opened and closed. Mrs. Aldrich's face went the particular color that faces go when they understand, very suddenly, that the ground has shifted. Lord Whitmore, bless the man, started toward them, and I saw the moment he looked at Edmund's face and recalculated everything he had heard over the past 3 years and made a new calculation in its place. He reached them in 4 strides and shook Miss Voss's hand and said he was delighted she had been able to come, which was the kind of lie that becomes the truth the moment it is said in the right room by the right host. Miss Voss stood very still beside my brother and did not tremble and did not weep and did not do anything that would have given anyone present the satisfaction of seeing her undone. She said, "Thank you, my lord," to Whitmore in a clear and even voice. She said nothing else. She did not need to. Edmund kept her hand. I cornered him the next morning, before he left for the committee. "You love her," I said. "Yes," he said, without hesitation, which was unusual for Edmund. He was a man who considered his answers. I have loved her since the afternoon she sat in my study and laid out 3 years of fraudulent instruments on my desk without a tremor and told me the conclusion she had reached and waited for me to say she was wrong. He paused. She wasn't wrong. You might have told her. I might have made her a target. Edmund. I might have given her hope and then failed to deliver. He looked at me. She had been failed enough. I thought about that. About the particular shape of care that does not announce itself, that works in the dark and expects no acknowledgement, that spends 3 years protecting something it cannot yet claim. It was not a romantic instinct. Edmund was not, in the conventional sense, a romantic man. He was a man who believed that love was demonstrated in action or it was not demonstrated at all, and who had spent 3 years demonstrating it in the only way he could without endangering her. I thought about the 3 years she had waited. Not passively, she had built her own life during those years, had managed, had endured. But she had waited, not knowing whether the Duke of Harrowvale was her ally or simply a man who had taken her documents and filed them somewhere inconvenient. She had carried the not knowing with the same composure she carried everything. What will you do now? I asked. I will speak to her, he said, properly, when the committee is done and Aldrich is finished and the record is corrected, when she has a moment in which none of this is crisis. And if she says no? He considered this with what appeared to be genuine uncertainty, which was not an expression I had seen on my brother frequently. Then I will have spent 3 years ensuring her name was restored and her father's wrong was answered, and that will have been worth doing regardless of what she says afterward. I looked at him for a moment. Edmund, I said, you are going to be very difficult to explain to people. I have never asked to be easily explained, he said, and left for the committee. She did not say no. I was not present for that conversation either. I have some principles. But I learned the shape of it from Edmund, who told me not because he was a man who confided easily, but because I had been there for all of it, and he understood that I had a right to the ending after sitting through the whole of the middle. She had asked him first why he had not told her what he was doing. He had told her the truth, all of it, without softening. The fear of exposing her, the fear of failing her, the 3 years of moving pieces in the dark while she waited in the light not knowing if she was waiting for anything. He had told her about the invitations, about the hostesses, about the small invisible machinery he had kept running so that the world did not close around her while he worked. She had listened. She had been very quiet for a long time. Then she had said, "You should know that I spent 2 of those 3 years believing you had washed your hands of me." "I know," he said. "And 1 of those years believing you were still." She stopped. "I did not stop hoping," she said finally. "I tried. I found it was not something I could stop doing." Edmund, who was not a man given to impulsive declarations, said, "I would like you to stop waiting. I would like to be the thing you are waiting for, and I would like you not to wait for it any longer." She had looked at him with those remarkable, still dark eyes. She had said, "Then you had better ask me properly." He had. She had said yes. I think about that evening sometimes, the library, the ballroom, his hand held out at the door, the moment Lord Whitmore crossed the floor and made the recalculation and came forward. I think about the particular courage required to stand in the center of a room that has decided who you are and remain still while someone names you differently. She had that courage in abundance. She always had. She had simply been waiting for someone to stand beside her while she used it. My brother was not, by any measure, a simple man to love. He was brooding and methodical, and he expressed devotion the way he expressed most things, through action, through structure, through getting the thing done and letting the done thing speak for itself. He was not the Duke who would have swept into a ballroom to make a scene. He was the Duke who had spent 3 years in committee rooms and correspondence and careful maneuvering, building a scaffold of justice under a woman he had not yet earned the right to claim, so that when the moment came, the ground would be solid beneath her feet. She understood that eventually. She understood it because she was the kind of woman who read the structure of things, who looked at the evidence and drew the correct conclusion even when the evidence required assembly. She had done it with the accounts. She did it with him. The wedding was small, by the standards of a Duke of Harrowvale. Edmund did not want a performance. He wanted her to have a day that belonged to her without spectacle, without the crowd of society witnesses looking on to see what they should make of it. The church was in the village at Harrowvale itself, stone and old glass and the sound of the November wind outside, and the guests were the people who had genuinely mattered, not the people who should be seen to matter. She walked toward him in a dress that was not fashionable by London standards, and did not need to be, and he watched her come with the expression of a man who has waited a long time, and is now watching the thing he waited for arrive and finding the wait entirely worth it. He said her name in the church, as he had said it in the library. Like a door that had been held shut for 3 years, finally completely open. Cecily, he said, and she looked at him, and her composure, that remarkable, hard-won, enduring composure, broke into something warmer and steadier and more real. I stood to his left, as brothers do, and I watched him find the ending of the story he had been carrying without speaking of for 3 years, and I thought, this is what it looks like when a man decides that love is not a declaration but a practice, and that practice is the most honest declaration of all. I was right, of course. I am occasionally right about things. He never let go of her hand,